That's right. We're going over that Ben Shapiro video. And by that Ben Shapiro video, I mean the Ben Shapiro destroys transgenderism and pro-abortion arguments video. Now, whenever I see destroys now in a title for a Ben Shapiro video, I think back to that Andrew Neil interview when Andrew Neil's like, "Don't you think you're like also poisoning the discourse as well when you're saying like destroys or stuff in the titles?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't think I've ever done that." And then he like reads off a bunch of Daily Wire titles with that in the title. That's some funny stuff. But yeah, regardless, let's begin. So for those of you who don't know, this is the video that like propelled Ben Shapiro into the status of a master debater, so to say, and it's still one of the most popular videos on the Daily Wire channel, I believe, and I'm sure we've all seen it. There's been countless clips of it. I have tried my best to find a version without super annoying air horns blasting in the background to signify when it's time to laugh or whatever. But yeah, here's Ben Shapiro's channel. It's a second most viewed video here, and on the Daily Wire it's the third most viewed one. But yeah, let's begin here.
So,
I'm ready.
how do you say that some people don't have privilege when you basically just said that trans people aren't valid? They're not a thing. They're just girls pretending to be boys or boys pretending to be girls.
Okay.
Like, okay.
So I apologize for the atrocious audio quality on this microphone here. There's not much I can do about this as the viewer. So yeah, let's keep going.
Someone's excited. Okay.
Sex is biological, but gender is a completely different thing.
No, gender is not disconnected from sex. So.
It's not completely disconnected, but it's still a cultural thing. It's still from society. It's
Okay. No, it is not in the mind. Okay. You're not a man if you think you're a man. And I didn't say pretending, or if I did, I shouldn't have said pretending. Let me amend.
said playing.
Okay, I said a boy who thinks he's a girl. That's the usual phraseology I use. Not playing. I usually say
Whenever he says phraseology, I think of that political compass test.
a boy who thinks he's a girl or a girl who thinks he's a boy, which is technically what we're talking about here. As far as the actual psychological issues at play.
Let's begin a bit actually, because he's going to get to a lot of stuff really quickly. So right off the bat, he has said multiple things. He has said, number one, that sex and gender are not different. And for this, I can very simply say that, hey, you can either take Ben Shapiro's word for it, or you can take the word for most, reputable medical and scientific institutions, of which I can list out a few here. So here is an incomplete list of the reputable scientific and social organizations which affirm the validity of transgender people, that trans is not an illness, that trans people are deserving of respect, equal rights, etc. This also serves as a list of the institutions which recognize the difference between sex and gender. So, American Psychological Association, American Medical Association, American Psychoanalytical Association, Human Rights Campaign, Human Academy of Pediatrics, American College of Osteopathic Pediatricians, Royal College of Psychiatrists, United Nations, United Kingdom National Health Service. So this is just a few of the reputable medical institutions that recognize that, hey, sex more to do with the biological side of things, more to do with where you fall on the sex bimodal distribution, while gender has more to do with like a social phenomena or social roles that we create through social interactions within a society. So that's point number one. Okay, you can take Ben Shapiro's word for it, or you can take the vast majority of reputable scientific and medical associations. The second thing he says here is stuff like this, like, you're not a man if you think you're a man, or like, who thinks he's a girl, or a girl who thinks she's a boy. These aren't arguments. These are textbook definitions of tautologies. So, like, he's not providing any argument here. He's just, like, affirming his opinion. It's just a different way of stating his opinion. Like, obviously, assuming that, like, the logical validity of his statement, it's not possible for like a guy to think that he's a girl or a girl to think that he's a guy, because these are two different words. And by saying that, he's resorting to tautology, which is when like the answer is baked in the statement. It's not an argument, it's just a statement. So far we have a clash between Ben Shapiro and the medical and academic communities, and non-argument but a tautology so far. But yeah, let's keep watching.
Play, it used to be called. As far as the actual psychological issues at play, it used to be called gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder. Now they call it gender dysphoria. The idea that sex or gender are malleable is not true. Okay, and I'm not denying your humanity if you're a transgender person. I am saying that you are not the sex to which you claim to be. You're still a human being, and you're a human being with an issue that I wish you Godspeed in dealing with in whatever way you see fit. But if you are going to dictate to me that I'm supposed to pretend that men are women and women are men, no. My answer is no. I'm not going to modify basic biology because it threatens your subjective sense of what you are.
So yeah, some more things here. Straight up, more tautologies. Like if you're gonna tell me that like women are that men are women and women are men, non-argument. Just tautology, so to say. Furthermore, he also talks about wishing that, I wish you the best of luck in dealing with like gender dysphoria, so to say. Given what we're about to hear later in the video, he very much does not have an opinion which is conductive with the most well-affirmed methods by which to deal with issues in relation to gender dysphoria, so that's also not really true at all. Then he says this as well: the idea that sex or gender are malleable is not true. So this statement, or like the belief that like these aren't like concepts, or these are something that like we find like out in the desert, like written on a stone tablet or something, just doesn't make any sense really. Sex and gender are both like social constructions that we've made in order to try to like explain some form of phenomena. When it comes to sex, we're trying to explain like physical and biological phenomena in human like genetic variation on the very like broad sense. And exactly where we draw the line between this and, what sex is exactly, that is something that is malleable, that is something that is up to social debate, and that is something that the medical community often talks about and tries to define and stuff like that. So it's not something that's like set in stone, objective or whatever. So it's not like immalleable as he's making it seem here. When it comes to gender, gender is sort of the reflection of the social phenomena of social gender roles that exist, which varies between place and time and culture and the rest of it. And this as well is not something that can be like defined objectively. So it's not possible to say that, okay, at this point you filled like a sufficient amount of like feminine social roles for you to be deemed a woman, because hey, what is more feminine or less feminine varies depending on the person, depending on the place, depending on like all these types of things. So it's also something that is sort of like malleable and fluid, or so to say. But regardless of that, we are over 1 minute and 20 seconds in, and we still haven't heard any arguments. We have heard just like statements. Gender and sex aren't malleable. We've heard "I wish you the best of luck," which, given what we're about to hear later, is counterproductive to what's best for transgender individuals. And then we've heard another tautology, like men that think they're women and women who think they're men. So far, just tautologies, just statements, no research, no data, no actual arguments provided thus far. And we're 1 minute and 22 seconds in, but let's keep watching.
Modify basic biology because it threatens your subjective sense.
Also, him saying basic biology when he's literally in disagreement with practically every single reputable medical institution is pretty funny, so to say, but yeah.
Of what you are.
Okay, but you're still saying these kids should like not be accepted because they don't really fit in either place? They can't just like...
I'm saying that the Boy Scouts have a standard. You must be a biological boy to be a Boy Scout. You have to be a boy to be a Boy Scout.
Where's that written though? Okay.
In the name Boy Scouts. Because
this is the clip moment that everyone's seen a million times. This feels like we're doing like online politics, like 2016, like excavation of like the ruins and the history and the ancient text, so to say. But when it comes to stuff like this, right, once again, it's kind of tautological. So the thing that she's implying there is like, okay, so like how, like who's to say that when the Boy Scouts are talking about boys, they're referring to the social role of boyhood, like this masculine type of thing, and then given the opinion of the lady and most medical and scientific institutions, that's going to be separated from sex. So therefore, like most transgender individuals should be able to participate in like the Boy Scouts if that's the gender that they identify as. That's what she's getting at. And Ben Shapiro has already thrown out the idea about the difference of sex and gender, regardless of the opinions of like medical professionals on the topic. He has also just like conflated terms here and there and resorted to tautology so far. And then he also goes above that and assumes that, hey, boy in Boy Scouts necessarily refers to like malehood, so to say, rather than boyhood, for instance, which if you're talking about the word specifically, the latter interpretation of that is much more realistic. So yeah, I mean, in this situation, we just have something that like, it sounds good, like, oh, where's that written? Oh, in the name Boy Scout. Like, it sounds good, but then when you think about it for more than 3 seconds, you realize that this that's not really, you know, a good argument, or that doesn't really have much to do with what we're talking about. So yeah, but let's keep going.
This is because this is a very because for all of human history, boy meant boy and girl meant girl. Boy did not mean girl. And if I call you a moose, are you suddenly a moose? Okay, if I redefine our terms.
So here he's again shifting the goalpost. So he says that for all of human history, boy has meant boy and girl has meant girl. Once again, these are still tautological statements. He's not saying boy has meant X, Y, and Z character trait that doesn't apply to transgender people. He's just saying boy has meant boy and girl has meant girl. Once again, a tautology, not an argument. But furthermore, that's not necessarily true. Even if we assume that he had made a proper argument, like boy has always meant X, Y, and Z, and girl had always meant X, Y, and Z, that's also not true, because the concepts of gender vary substantially throughout history, throughout time, and throughout locations. And even like contemporarily today, in different parts of the world, it means vastly different things. Even if you go back, you know, as fairly recently in American history, I remember hearing something about how previously, like, all adolescents or like toddlers or like very young people were all referred to as girls, and it was post puberty where the gender differences began to really accentuate themselves. That's when we began using like different gender terms for boys and girls. But nowadays it's like right from, you know, from the point of birth, when you're assigned a gender or like sex at birth, that type of gender terminology is used. So that's not even entirely true from an American context either, which is a nation that's only been around for about like 300 years or something. So yeah, incorrect on that point as well. And then furthermore, now he brings in that, oh, if I say I'm a moose, then does that make me a moose or whatever? And he develops a bit more on this argument, so I'm going to let him do that before I respond to that part as well. So, yeah.
And if I call you a moose, are you suddenly a moose? Okay, if I redefine our terms. No, yes, that's right. Men and women are a completely different thing. This is true. Have you ever met a man or a woman? They're completely different.
So once again, she isn't saying that these two things are the same. It's entirely possible, like, we recognize that, hey, societally, like, these are different things. Men and women are different things, obviously. Like, I don't even think she agrees with this. And the implication then from Ben Shapiro's side is that, okay, assuming that these are two different things, then therefore, because we know that a boy's a boy and a girl's a girl, then therefore there can be no like interplay or like transitioning between the two, or so to say. So once again, just completely missing the point here of what she's trying to portray here. But let's keep going.
You can't just say you're a cat. It's not a thing. It's genders. It's not saying you're.
Okay, why is that? I don't understand. Why? Okay, let me ask you this. Okay, I won't ask you how old. I will ask you how old you are. Okay, because you're young enough that it's probably not insulting to ask you. So.
I'm 22, so I'm probably only naive, right?
No. Why aren't you 60? Why aren't you 60?
Because it.
And why can't you identify as 60? What is the problem with you identifying as 60?
Because it's not the same as gender. You can't just.
You're right. Age is significantly less important than gender.
Okay, so here we have another thing that, okay, if you can be transgender, then why can't you be trans age? Well, the thing is that both of these are like our social what's the word for it? Social constructs, right? There is no like objective thing determining that we need to break down time in, you know, in seconds and hours and minutes and days and weeks and months and years and decades and centuries. Like, that's not an objective thing. That's sort of like a socially constructed measurement of time that we have made. And the same is true with gender, right? Gender is like a social construction that way. However, what differentiates the social construct of gender, the way we understand today, to the social construct of time in the way we understand it today, is that the social construct of time maps onto something that is like sort of like more like objective or empirical in a sense, right? It's meant to map onto the objective passing of time, the objective like sequence of events, the fact that we aren't like frozen in one moment for all of eternity, right? While gender, what that's supposed to reflect onto is it's not reflecting onto something like tangible or something like, you know, objective or realistic. It's meant to reflect like social norms and social roles and you know, like gendered associations, gendered expression, gender identity, and stuff like that. So while one of them is like an identity, because what it's mapping onto is it's mapping onto a social construct, while the other social construct is mapping onto something that is sort of like more objective or empirical, so to say, that's where there's a distinction between the two. One of them is an identity, and one of them is not an identity at the end of the day. And that's another distinction here that Ben Shapiro fails to grasp. Everything that is like sort of like socially constructed or socially interpreted to Ben Shapiro here are just like put in the same basket of things now, when there are very significant differences between them, which like, you know, allow for you to, modify like your gender and go through like a transgender experience, so to say, in one of them, whilst, you know, for the other one, that's not really the same, you know, the case there. So yeah, let's keep going.
You can't magically change your gender. You can't magically change your sex.
Once again, not arguments, just statements. So we're 2 minutes and 47 seconds in, and the closest thing we've gotten to an argument so far is Ben Shapiro misunderstanding differences between different forms of like social classifications and like social constructions, and then the boy one. And those are the two closest things we've gone to arguments so far, and we're over like a quarter of the way into the video.
You can't magically change your age.
You can still legally change it. People recognize
You can't legally change your age, by the way.
Obviously, you can change your name, you can change your sex, you can change your identity.
Just because you can.
And then also you can bring in the medical side of these things, how like, hey, one of the reasons why we at least, you know, medically should recognize the fact that gender is something that is fluid and that can be, you know, like adapted to and and stuff like that, is because we know that if we don't allow individuals to do that, that has super harsh effects when it comes to like their general well-being. We know that there is something that a transgender individual wishes to like express and wishes to identify as and to be treated as, and if that requirement is not met, then there is going to be like negative outcomes for that person. And that's another reason why it should be like taken seriously, and we should modify our understanding of these concepts based on that, because it is something that is so important, and that doesn't map on with current understandings, or at least like that in past understandings of the topic, that we need to like modify it on the basis of that. And that same type of sort of like what's it called, like dysphoria, so to say, like age dysphoria, it's not a thing, right? That doesn't exist in the same way that gender dysphoria does. So yeah, we have that as well.
Do things legally doesn't mean that they are correct biologically. You could do lots of things in the past that were incorrect biologically and correct legally. For a long period of time in the United States, sterilization of the mentally ill took place. That didn't make it okay. Skinner versus Oklahoma. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote the decision.
Right. I still don't understand how you accepting these children that have gender.
It's not a matter of open-minded and accepting. I want them to get treatment that they see fit, but that's not involving me. The idea behind the transgender movement as a civil rights movement is the idea that all of their problems would just go away if I would pretend that they were the sex to which they claim membership. That's nonsense.
So once again, part of effective like I suppose like treatment for gender dysphoria is treating these people, or treating like trans people, as fucking people, as the, you know, the gender that they identify as. That is part of what contributes to the alleviation of gender dysphoria. Now here he's saying that it all rests on my, you know, ability to call people he or she or whatever. That's also not true. Obviously it's not like a single thing. It's not just like, oh, are you treating this person as a trans person? Well, their gender dysphoria is resolved. Oh, you're not doing that? Well, then it's going to be there to the same extent. Like, obviously, the social acceptance makes a part, and it's like one component of an affirmative care model, which seems to be the best model we have right now for taking care of transgender individuals. And he doesn't seem to understand that that's part of the equation. That's part of good like treatment of like transgender individuals in society. So yeah, we have the conflation between him saying that, oh, it's either this solves everything or it does nothing, and then the other stuff as well. But yeah, thank you, Weirdamorphous Ball, for this subscription. I really appreciate it.
The transgender suicide rate is 40%. It is 40%. And according to the Anderson School at UCLA, it makes no difference. There's a study that came out last year. It makes no difference, virtually no difference, statistically speaking, as to whether people recognize you as a transgender person or not, which suggests there's a very high comorbidity between transgenderism, whatever that mental state may be, and suicidality. That has nothing to do with how society treats you.
So not only at this point have we seen basically no arguments and just like tautologies and just like statements and stuff like that at that point, but now we go straight the fuck into like, you're just wrong. You're like objectively wrong on this given topic. So the first thing he says is that the transgender suicide rate is 40%. This is not true. That specific number comes from like attempted suicide rate. So it's not the same, obviously. There's quite a bit difference between an attempted suicide and an actually completed suicide. So that's point number one. He just doesn't have like a good idea of what the data he's reading actually suggests. Either he isn't reading it carefully enough, or he's misreading it, or whatever. And yeah, so that's the first thing. Secondly, he references a paper which he incorrectly references it from all I've seen, from all I've read. What he's referring to is this one, the UCLA Williams Institute, paper, instead of, what did he say? He said UCLA Anderson School. They didn't publish anything that's relevant to this discussion at all, but UCLA Williams Institute did. And like literally, if we read this report, or like even the key findings of it, so suicide thoughts and attempts among transgender students, finding from 2015 US Transgender Survey. The video was published in 2017, but I think that this was, this is like a review of that. Studies show that prevalence of suicide thoughts and attempts among transgender adults is significantly higher than that of the US population. Using data from the 2015 Transgender Survey, this report examines key risk factors associated with suicidality among a sample of transgender people. And like, literally, the highlights of this state respondents who experienced discrimination or were a victim of violence were more likely to report suicide thoughts and attempts. Respondents who experienced family rejection were also more likely to report attempting suicide. Access to gender-affirming medical care is associated with a lower prevalence of suicide thoughts and attempts. So, like, this, like, literally proves the point that, hey, and it's this. And then there's a bunch of other literature as well that affirms this. I can go through a little bit of it right now if you want to. That affirms the point that, hey, societal acceptance, societal treatment is massively influential when it comes to your ability to be able to do well in society as a transgender individual. So he's just wrong. I don't know what he's referring to at all with stuff like this, because like the thing he's citing doesn't affirm his point. And on top of this, we can also point to a wide range of different other sort of research we have and studies we have on it, talking about the effects of societal acceptance when it comes to to the rest of compared to the rest of society. So if we talk about discrimination, bullying, and suicide, all the research we have right now at the moment has to do and affirms the opinion that harassment and bullying and maltreatment has a significant effect when it comes to transgender individuals' acceptance and their mental well-being. So once again, this also points out this is attempt rate, not suicide rate, as Ben Shapiro makes it sound as. And you can basically pause the video at any point now that you want, and just pick any one of these and go through them. Another one of the most noticeable ones here is that there was a study in Canada which measured the effect of parental. I can actually show the rest of this as well. Which measured the parental acceptance and the role of that when it comes to mental health issues in relation to suicidality and stuff like that. And it's this one right here, that parental support. Strong parental support decreased the likelihood of a suicide attempt within the last year from 57% to 4%. So I don't know what he's referencing here or what he's talking about, but the thing I think he's talking about, which is this Williams Institute 2015 survey, doesn't agree with him. The vast majority in the body of evidence, documenting this, doesn't agree with him. There's nothing here. There's nothing, tangible here that he's referring to that agrees with him. It is a known fact that, hey, the affirmative care model, which includes societal acceptance and not being fucking bullied and treated as subhuman on account of being trans or whatever, coupled with the relevant treating depending on your age range, so hormone replacement therapy, SRS, and stuff like that, have a positive effect on these individuals' well-being and alleviate gender dysphoria to the point where they are no longer suffering from gender dysphoria once the sort of affirmative care model has run its course. So he's just plain wrong on this in its entirety. He's completely incorrect. Number one, misunderstood that 40% statistic, and number two, he's citing something that actively disagrees with what he's saying. So let's keep watching.
For that mental state may be, and suicidality. That has nothing to do with how society treats you.
Do you think it could be because of they're bullied at school?
No, I don't think that. I do not think that the discrepancy. I do not think the discrepancy. First of all, I'm against bullying of any sort. Okay, the idea that somebody would beat somebody up is terrible. Okay, as somebody who's viciously bullied in high school, I'm not a fan of bullying. But the idea that the normal suicide rate across the United States is 4%. The suicide rate in the transgender community is 40%. The idea that 36% more transgender people are committing suicide because people are mean to them is ridiculous. It's not true, and it's not backed by any science that anyone can cite.
So once again, he cites nothing to support this notion. I've cited a bunch of them. Number two, he's setting the threshold of evidence like stupidly high, where nobody kind of like sets the standard at. So typically what we know right now is that, hey, social acceptance plays one part in the puzzle, and so does the other stuff. So does like the medical side of things also play a part in the puzzle. So it's like connected. But what he's saying is that, hey, unless you can point me to like a specific study that says that this, 36% discrepancy, which isn't the case. Once again, he's comparing attempted versus like confirmed suicide, so to say. So that's not even true. Unless you can prove that 36% is only because of bullying, then I'm not going to listen to you, which obviously is not the case. We do have plenty of evidence like suggesting that bullying and maltreatment and harassment and abuse is substantially responsible for like a big reason behind the elevated risks of like mental health issues and gender dysphoria amongst transgender individuals. But that's one part of it, and then there's the other parts of it as well that contribute to like solving the puzzle. So yeah, he's completely incorrect on this. But yeah.
It is pure conjecture. In fact, it's not even true that
And yeah, the statement that like, wait, hold on, let me let him speak.
bullying causes suicide, according to a lot of studies.
Once again, a lot of studies, no citation given here.
Example, in the black community, where the idea is supposedly that America is a racist society, blacks are bullied a lot. Okay, in the black community has significantly lower suicide rates than in the white community.
So I think Ben Shapiro, at least back then, and I'm going to say this as well, because I have a feeling this might be one of the rebuttals that is heard, like, oh, why are you going over a Ben Shapiro video from like 4 years ago? Go over something like more recent. But like he literally like very recently, like just this week, posted like another like a clip or like a highlight from like that debate on his channel, which is, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, which is here. So this is 5 days ago.
Okay, I won't ask you how.
He's still posting clips from this debate, which indicates that like he still believes it was like a good debate or a good performance by him at least. So I don't know. I guess Ben Shapiro back then, maybe now as well, believes that systemic racism is when black people are bullied all the time, and that's what systemic racism is, when that's not what systemic racism means like at all. He's basically using the fact that the black community commits suicide less than the white community to disprove the point that bullying like reduce or increases the risk of suicide, which is like such a like, I don't even know how big this stretch is. Like, it's like he would be, if he could like materialize this like intellectual stretching he's doing and make it anywhere near manifest into actual like physical stretching he would do, holy fuck, he would be the yoga champion of the fucking world, because that, my friends, was a leap of logic of incredible proportions. But yeah.
In fact, in third world countries, the suicide rate is significantly lower than in first world countries. Suicide actually seems to be a privilege of the upper classes, if you actually look at it from a financial perspective. So the idea that suicidality is directly a result of people like me saying, no, men are not women and women are not men, it's not true. It's also...
So once again, here he is reducing like all the different complex factors that lead to nationwide suicide rates to, oh, it just has to do with wealth, therefore it cannot be the case that like bullying increases suicide, when that's absolutely not the case. There's a wide range of different things that build into suicidality: social atomization, different cultural trends, yada yada yada. There's a million different things I can talk about here. But even like pointing to poor countries and saying, look, they kill themselves less than wealthy countries, doesn't disprove the statement that bullying increases like risk of like suicide or whatever. So once again, this is just wrong.
Impact their identity at all, or their depression, or how they feel about themselves?
I think the idea that you're going to sacrifice the entire society's proper definition of sex because you think that there is in legal terms, somebody with an eggshell skull, meaning that somebody who has a pre-existing condition that makes them more susceptible to criticism, that is not a way to run a society. You can't sacrifice truth because some people are going to actually suffer because of the truth. Plus, there's no evidence whatsoever that the suicide rate would go down in the transgender community in any marked way if people just started pretending that men were women and women were men. We're trying that experiment now. We'll find out whether it works.
So once again, we got the tautology pulling up once again. But regardless of that, there is a fuck ton of literature. Like, we just talked about this, right? Like, part of the stuff I showed on screen, that like parental acceptance within that place in Canada reduced the attempted suicide rate from like 57% to 4%. So I don't know where he's getting this information from, that societal acceptance and like going towards like more updated, more scientifically agreed upon like terms and definitions and understandings of sex and gender is harmful. There's just no substantiation for this at all. It's just like being stated sort of like in the void.
So far, no evidence.
Have you talked to a group of trans people at all instead of this group of like white people?
I'm more than happy to talk to a group of any people who will have me, but usually they protest me.
Okay, last question about your Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, and then there's like if Ben Shapiro doesn't seem to be a great fan of studies, he likes broad like statistical trends. So we can go by what Weird Amorphous Blob is saying, like the suicide rate of trans people like today is way lower than it was 20 years ago. And if we use just correlations here and try to get that to explain everything, then hey, oh, this must mean that, hey, because we've got more societal accepting of trans people, that is the only thing that, you know, like influenced like this like, you know, suicide rate change or whatever. And that should be there should be a perfect argument for Ben Shapiro here. So yeah, if we want to do like specific studies, which I prefer to do, or if you want to do large broad correlations that Ben Shapiro prefers to do, on whichever point, like his statements are just completely unsubstantiated.
Good thing. So why do you think it's not about controlling women's bodies and just about the separate life? Like after the baby is born, how come when people don't care about them? They don't care where they end up in foster care. They don't care about the mother being poor. Like...
Okay, I do care about the mother being.
And now we're going on to a discussion on abortion, which is the arguments aren't any better there, but I'm going to try to keep this to the trans point as well. It's by far the most well-known part of the this debate anyway. But yeah, like if this would have been my debate, and like not on this topic obviously because I wasn't debating these things, but I use like these type of arguments, just like tautologies, misreadings of studies, misunderstandings of studies, literally lying about studies, stating that there is no evidence for something that there's a fuck ton of evidence for, really bad gotchas that dissipate as soon as you think about them for more than 3 seconds. Like, I would be embarrassed to have this up. I would have unlisted like this video if I debated like Ben Shapiro did here during this video. And this is one of his most famous videos that he still stands by, as is obvious by the fact that he still likes uploading clips from this specific debate here. So yeah, it's really embarrassing. And keep in mind that this was a debate clip about transgender like issues that like took the internet by storm in 2017 and was like, oh shit, these are such good arguments. I guess trans people don't deserve healthcare and acceptance. Lol. Like, I don't know. It's I guess it's a hope pill to see how far we've come on these issues since then. But yeah, holy shit, this was probably one of the worst debates I've had the displeasure of watching. But yeah, that surfs debate was pretty bad too. So I'll just leave it at that.